to the earth, mother of all. I will sing the well-established.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Musing, music for the adventurous listener here on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary and on all your favorite podcast platforms. I'm your host, Janna Sailor, and today I'm joined by celebrated Canadian percussionist Beverley Johnston. Renowned for her dynamic artistry and commitment to new music, Beverley has been a leading force in shaping Canada's percussion and contemporary landscape for decades. In this episode, we'll be diving into her latest CD release, a vibrant and compelling recording that showcases the expressive range of percussion while highlighting works by contemporary and Canadian composers. We'll talk about the inspiration behind all 8 of her albums, the collaborative process, and what continues to drive her decades of creative work as a performer and advocate for new music. Let's listen in.
The oldest, who nourishes on her surface everything that lives. Those things that walk upon the holy ground, and those that swim in the sea, and those that fly. All these are nourished by your abundance.
Beverley Johnston, thank you so much for being my guest today on Musing. Such a pleasure to be in conversation today.
Thanks for having me. I love it in the western part of Canada, so it's so great to talk with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive right in. For someone who perhaps hasn't experienced your artistry, how do you describe what you do and your mandate as a creative and performing artist?
I'm a percussionist, so just to be blunt about it, I beat things for a living. So it seems like a weird career, but I've been doing it since I was 12 years old in the concert band. I grew up in Lachine, Quebec, which is a suburb of Montreal. I came to Toronto in 1976, and I came for just basically to get away from my parents. Now I teach at the University of Toronto. I hear the same story from my own students saying, well, I just wanted to get away from home. So I had no idea what I was in for. I came for music education, and then I had a teacher who was just phenomenal, Russell Hartenberger from the percussion ensemble Nexus. So that really opened up my percussion sound world, and I haven't looked back since. And we still are in touch with each other, Russ and myself. And in fact, he nominated me for the Order of Canada. So it's really come full circle. And he's a fantastic person and a great musician, so I learned so much from him. And then I just kind of started a career of freelancing in Toronto, playing with the National Ballet Orchestra, the Canadian Opera Company Orchestra, Toronto Symphony as an extra player. And then I was also at the same time really interested in contemporary music, so I went down that path and eventually started focusing in on that more than the freelance work.
I can't see, it's dark. I can't see, it's dark. It's dark. I see a flame spark. I can't see, it's dark. I can't see, it's dark. It's dark. I see a flame spark. I can't think. I can't think. All I hear is dogs barking. I can't think. I can't think. I can't take the conflict. I can't take the violence. I can't take this blasphemy. take the conflict, I can't take the violence.
I'd love to dive into this a bit more, because how does a 12-year-old girl become interested in being a percussionist? You're not playing the flute or the clarinet.
My high school teacher demonstrated the instruments. Like one day it would be, the double reeds like oboe and bassoon. And so we'd try them out, and all the other brass and woodwinds. But the percussion really caught my ear. It was immediate. You just hit the instrument and immediately you make a sound. So that prompted me to investigate that instrument over the others. And oddly enough, the section was all girls in my high school. So it seemed natural to me that girls play percussion, but I found out later on that not necessarily so. In fact, I think I was one of the first in Toronto to make a living. I never really kind of considered myself like the female percussionist. It was just, this is what I want to be doing, and I happen to be female doing it. So, perhaps there were obstacles in the way, but the solo part of it, maybe subconsciously, it was easier for me to be a soloist and do my own thing as a soloist than perhaps just be a member of a section of an orchestra. I loved the feeling of being able to express myself totally on my own. Is that selfish? I'm not sure, but I just loved that feeling. So I pursued that. And I think a part of the reason also the solo thing was because I started at the age of 7 with piano. So, I was learning things about phrasing and all this kind of stuff, which lent very nicely into the percussion world with the keyboard percussion instrument. And a lot of the repertoire was solo for marimba, solo vibraphone, So just that trajectory kind of went that way.
Tell me about what draws you to some of these different instruments within the percussion family, like marimba, as you just mentioned. And what is the magical draw of some of these instruments? And do you have ones that you particularly gravitate towards?
It's changed over the years as I get older. I hate to admit, but I'm not playing as much marimba, but that's the instrument that really attracted me, because Russell, my teacher, had this beautiful old Deegan marimba that I played on, and just the warmth of the sound of the wood just appealed to me so much, more so than perhaps the vibraphone or any of the other keyboard percussion instruments. And at the time, this was like the late 70s, the 80s, the repertoire was really expanding for that instrument. So there was a lot of opportunity to express myself through marimba playing. Now, another part of percussion playing that really appealed to me was just like the different tone colors and textures from all the different like world music instruments, like Thailand gongs and cymbals and, you name it. Anything you can hit, basically. But the thing that I knew I want to play contemporary music was a concert I went to. It was New Music Concerts, Bob Aiken conducting, and he was the artistic director. And they were doing a piece by R. Murray Schafer called Loving. And it had 6 percussionists and singers and other instrumentalists, and just this whole sound world, where percussion wasn't just about rhythm. And entering into that world, it just did something to me that said, oh God, I really want to do this.
You touched on the repertoire expanding as you were, progressing through your career. Can you talk to me a bit about, composers that you crossed paths with or worked with or perhaps commissioned or, those kind of collaborations that are really meaningful and shape your career path going forward?
As far as the repertoire is concerned, that I was doing composers that I never met would be more the Japanese style marimba repertoire, which was very extreme feelings of like very notey parts to silences, and composers like Akira Miyoshi, Maki Ishii, and Minoru Miki. So there was that. And then when I was at U of T, I would become friends with some of the student composers. So composers like Larisa Kuzmenkos, I'd get involved with some of her pieces. And then Gary Kalesha was another one, and he really investigated the different tone qualities you can get from the marimba. I also have a beautiful piece by David Yeager, he wrote me this in 1988. So that's quite a few years ago, which is called Lyrics. So this piece is very expressive. And more recently, Danuk Wijeratne wrote me a marimba solo. That is a beautiful piece too. In fact, one of my students is playing it in a few days on her recital. So I'm happy to see these pieces have life after the first performance.
What I love about your story is growing into your career and your artistic voice at the same time as some of these folks that are like the pillars of the Canadian composition scene. Can you talk to me maybe about that relationship between artist and composer and how that can work and just what goes into a healthy collaborative experience between the two?
I love the collaboration between composer and performer because I'm not a composer myself. I do improvisation. If I say I'm a composer, it's mostly just like a structured improvisation, so I'm not writing down my improvisations. But this is what I love. I love the interaction between composer and performer because I feel like I'm more a part of the piece. And also I get a piece that is geared more to my technique or lack thereof. You know what I mean? Like we all have our strengths and weaknesses as performers, but I feel I have more control over that. And there's a lot of back and forth. I always tell my students and other composers, it's like the piece is kind of 50% done when the composer writes the last note, and then the performer has to kind of find their own voice into the piece. So I encourage the composer to give the piece to the performer in enough time to learn it, and often that doesn't happen.
Tell me about your latest project and what you have in the works as well.
This past summer, I recorded my 8th feature CD, solo CD, and it's called Finding Her Voice, because over the years I've been interested in developing pieces that are based on iconic or historic female figures. I just kind of happened upon it, you know. I think it pretty much all started when composer Alice Ping Yi Ho and myself were coming up with ideas for her to write me a solo work. And she said, Bev, have you ever read the book Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkolas Estes? And I said, yes. I loved this book. I absolutely fell in love. And so she based this first solo piece on Baba Yaga. It's like a Ukrainian folklore about a woman, this wild woman who runs with the wolves. And I just fell in love with that and the piece too. It was just interesting because there was a bit of theater in it and, you know, walking around the stage and a bit of singing and all that. So that was kind of the start of it. And then I had other composers write for me. More recently, Julie Spencer. She's from the States originally, but she moved with her family to Germany in a town called Bingen, which is the town of where Hildegard of Bingen did all her work. She was a mystic, a poet, one of the first known female composers. And she also invented putting hops in beer to preserve beer. So yeah, good on her. But anyways, so I said, Julie, could you write me a piece kind of based on the spirit of Hildegard? So and I had at the time just acquired these beautiful cloud bowls, mostly used for meditation, but she incorporated them and the vibraphone and some cloud gongs into the piece, so it creates this kind of wonderful soundscape. And I have to use my voice too, so that's one of the pieces.
Pastor, animarum et opprima vox, perquam omnes creati sumus, nunc tibi placiato digneres, nos liberare de miseris, e languaribus nostris, languaribus nostris.
I asked David Yeager to write me another piece. So he called it Lyrics 2 because back in 1988 I had Lyrics 1. And this Lyrics 2 is dedicated to Norma Beecroft, who was a huge figure in the contemporary music scene, was co-founder of New Music Concerts with Bob Aiken, and she was one of the first female composers championing electronic music. do an improvisation on this recording called Meditations 2, and also a piece called The Crystal Gazer, because I was looking for poetry by a female poet in public domain. And I happened upon the poetry of Sarah Teasdale. I was looking around and all the other poetry seemed, just like prim and proper and this kind of stuff. But Sarah had kind of an edge to her poetry. And so I just did like a kind of a improvisation on Thailand gongs. My husband wrote me another piece called Eris for vibraphone and audio playback based on, the goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but a really enjoyable recording.
I shall gather myself into myself again. I shall take my scattered selves and make them one, fusing them into a polished crystal ball, where I can see the moon and the flashing sun. I shall sit like a sibyl, hour after hour intent, watching the future come and the present go, and the little shifting pictures of people rushing in restless self-importance to and fro.
Tell me about, that process of either a composer or yourself asking you to go beyond simply playing the instrument and, incorporating electronics or extended techniques, theatrics, or your voice. Talk to me about working within those mediums.
I think it happened because, Toronto is such a great place to just discover different things, to experiment. I'd always been involved with new music groups, new music concerts, array music. I was a member of the ensemble for almost 10 years. So, and through that, you meet different people, those interested in the same things you are. And because of that, I got involved in some workshops, one being a workshop on extended vocal techniques by a guy named Richard Armstrong, which kind of opened up the voice, which was fun. There were instrumentalists in the course. Plus, when I was taking the course, Barbara Hannigan was also a part of the course. So it was just really cool to discover things that are kind of not percussion, but can be added to whatever you're doing. And in fact, just maybe almost 2.5 years ago, I took a workshop in just outside of New York City with performance artist Meredith Monk, who is an incredible vocalist, but she has her own distinctive, independent way of doing things. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And it was actually Canadian composer Diana McIntosh from Winnipeg who told me about Meredith. And when I was at Diana's house, she had some recordings there, so I listened to some of her stuff and I just fell in love with it. So it's just, kind of searching here and there for all these different ways of doing things and getting involved with the scene in Toronto. And one thing leads to another. You get to know more people, and yeah, that's it.
I love that. And it seems like ultimately whatever the music requires, you're willing to explore it.
Yeah.
I love that.
And of course, along the way, I made a ton of mistakes. And I guess that's par for the course when you're experimenting with things.
Out through the fields and the woods, and over the walls I have wended. I have climbed the hills of view, and looked at the world, and descended. I have come by the highway home, and lo, it is ended. The leaves are all dead on the ground, save those that the oak is keeping, to ravel them one by one, and let them go, scraping and creeping out over the crusted snow, when others are sleeping. And the dead leaves lie huddled and still, no longer blown hither and thither. The last lone aster is gone, the flowers of the witch hazel wither. The heart is still aching to seek, but the feet question, whither?
Can you tell me a bit more about, were there specific turning points or experiences that you look back on and you think, well, that really shaped me or sent me in a certain direction, or I'll never do that again?
One thing, and it just shaped me in that it really brought my technique to a higher level, was playing a concerto with the Esprit Orchestra by Japanese composer Maki Ishii. And these pieces are not easy. It's the Japanese style of writing for marimba. It's like extremely notey. The dynamics are extreme, from quadruple piano to quadruple forte. So that brought my technique, I think, up to a strong level. I'm hesitant to say some of the things that didn't work out, but sometimes with repertoire, like I was busier when I was younger, so it was harder for me to manage all the different pieces that I was working on and having a freelance career. So sometimes I would not be as prepared as I should have been especially for some of the contemporary pieces that I was learning. So, that was hard to swallow. I got through it, but I could have been better. That went through my mind for a couple of things, and it really kind of woke me up to the fact, hey, Bev, you need to take time off. You need to, get your act together, get in the practice room and practice a lot more for certain types of pieces. And there was repertoire that didn't suit me at all. I'd pick something because I listened to it and go, oh, wow, I really want to play that. But it just didn't really suit me. So over the years, I kind of learned, well, what suits me, my technique and my playing, and the kind of repertoire that I like.
I can't smoke this away. I can't smoke this away. I can't ease this pain. This pain. This pain.
How did you kind of discover your voice as an artist and how you wanted to express it?
You know, I look at some of the percussionists these days who are remarkable and they're doing incredible things. I'm not sure if I could do that now, but I've always felt that my style as a percussionist may be a little more romantic as opposed to more linear technique. I can be a little bit more romantic in my style of playing.
So what's next for you creatively? What's in the works, or where do you see yourself going?
Okay, so I may be going through a bit of an existential crisis. I have to admit, because I'm approaching that big 70, you know, I'm going to be 70. So truth be told, I can't do the Maki Ishii pieces. Those things are not in the works. So my style has kind of calmed down a little bit. I still want to play. Like, I was at a concert last night, and it was Christina Petrowska-Quilico who was playing piano, and it was a CD launch of works by Alice Ping-Yi Ho. So, you know, and I'm listening to her, and she sounded fabulous. And I think she's over 75 years old, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, it was just really inspiring to me to hear that, you know, all the beautiful tone colors she got out of the piano. I want to continue to play, although I know that it's not going to be like super choppy, technical kind of playing, but it definitely will be expressive, I hope. And I still am commissioning. In fact, Alice Ho is going to write me another solo work, because she said way back when, she says, I want to write 3 pieces for you. So it's like a trilogy. So she has Woman Runs with Wolves. She has Witch on Thin Ice, which was based on the performance artist Yoko Ono. When she said, I want to do something about Yoko Ono, I kind of went, what? But then I started researching Yoko, and she's an unbelievable human being, you know, a peace activist, performance artist, poet. And it was just really a lot of fun to do the piece, because Alice added some animation to it and what have you. So she's going to write me a 3rd piece, and it's going to be based on an iconic female figure. So I'm not sure who it's going to be, but that's another piece on the go. And then I just had a meeting yesterday also with a student composer, is a student of my husband, Christos Hatzis, and their name is Ashley Seward. And so I really want them to be a part of this kind of finding her voice. And it's going to be a different kind of voice, but I'm really interested in exploring that. So those are a few of the projects. And then, of course, you know, summer festivals. And I've been involved with this project called Sounding Thunder, composer Timothy Corliss, which is about Indigenous sharpshooter Francis Pegamagabo. And it's a beautiful story. And so it's a part of the Festival of the Sound ensemble, which I totally enjoy playing with all of them. So I'm keeping it going. I don't know how much longer, but I hope for a while.
Beverley Johnston, thank you so much for being my guest today on Musing. It's been such a pleasure to dive in and discuss the beautiful aspects of your career and your creative journey.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been Musing on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. I'm your host, Janna Sailor. Thanks for joining me for this hour of music, ideas, and inspiration. We acknowledge that this podcast is created and shared across many Indigenous lands and territories now known as Canada. We honor the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples who have lived on and cared for these lands since time immemorial, and whose cultures, languages, and artistic practices continue to shape this place. As a national organization, the Canadian Music Centre recognizes the diversity of Indigenous nations and territories across the regions we serve, and we encourage listeners to learn about the lands they are on and the communities that they are a part of. Musing is a production of the Canadian Music Centre Prairie Region. Until next time, thanks for tuning in and for supporting Canadian artists in your community.